I am very familiar with the first Dead Rising game. It's my favorite of its series. I've 100%ed it a few times on Xbox 360, PS4, and PC. I know the ins and outs of that title like it's no one's business. When a quote-unquote deluxe remaster for Dead Rising got announced just a few weeks ago, I was pretty excited, until Frank opened his mouth.
Yeah, well, I'm freelance, pal. I don't make my living waiting for the TV to tell me what to cover.
That's not Frank West. In all seriousness, I was curious to see how this more than a remaster would pan out. After checking out a recent Capcom showcase, it seemed like my favorite company was about to deliver something pretty cool for one of, if not the best, zombie video games of all time. New graphics and refined gameplay mechanics? Sign me up. Well, thanks to Capcom, I got to play an in-development build of Deluxe Remaster for a few hours. I've got a lot to say about it, and unfortunately, a lot of what I experienced so far left me a little mixed. So, let's get into why. Dead Rising DR at its core is still Dead Rising 1. You still play as wartime photojournalist Frank West, investigating the zombie-infested town of Willamette, Colorado. You've still got only a few days to discover the truth, save survivors, work with your DHS buddies solving cases, and kill lots and lots of zombies. There are two control styles present in DR, but by default, controlling Frank feels modern. No longer are you dealing with his very classic Resident Evil-inspired feel from 2006. A classic control option exists as well, giving you the exact button and input layout to control, and even Frank's skills. For example, in the modern scheme, dodging is now on a single button press, while the classic setup needs you tapping the movement stick twice in a direction to roll. I was caught off guard with the new layout at first, but I got used to it fast. Seeing all of Frank's new attack and traversal animations was a treat for me, being very used to his original movements. It's fun seeing something so new looking in a game I know so well. One very obvious modernization is moving while aiming. So just like the rest of the Dead Rising series, DR gives you this ability. Though I'll say Frank doesn't move as fast while aiming as the other games allowed, so it doesn't feel completely out of the ordinary. This movement while aiming kind of feels like it was always in the original game, even though it isn't. I think the devs did a good job at striking a balance between keeping the original feel of the first game while introducing a whole new mechanic like this, even if it made some of the boss battles I played an absolute joke. Yeah, strafing around while firing even at Frank's speed and then carefully dodging attacks at the last minute was more than enough to clown on these psychos. A lot of minute updates are also introduced that make the game way more fun, like the remapping of Frank's counters to zombie grabs now being on the face buttons instead of complicated stick movements. Frank's skills are also easier to perform just by holding down the R1 button and pressing a corresponding face button, making for a much more natural feel to his special moves. The pause menu looks really stylish now and houses all relevant info, like your status, photo album, and encountered survivors, just like the original version of the game. All of the silly little activities you were able to do around the mall, like hitting the gym, spinning clothes racks, and stunt driving while skateboarding around Leisure Park, are happily preserved. All of the same clothing stores return, but this time you can track how many clothing pieces you've collected throughout the game in the safe room locker, just like Dead Rising 3. This makes character customization a lot more fluid, not having to constantly return to a specific store to get a certain outfit. Like every other modern Resident Evil game, you can now pause the cutscenes, which is an absolute godsend for Dead Rising. Another brand new feature that is an absolute game changer is the ability to advance time at save points. So yeah, if you don't know, this game and its original counterpart run in real time. So whenever you're in the game world, time is passing by. An issue that sometimes arose in the original Dead Rising was at certain points you'd be left with nothing meaningful to do in the mall. If you completed all available cases, you just have to wait out the in-game timer until you get another call to investigate a part of the mall again. Now you can totally bypass that wait, and it makes the game feel more streamlined and also a little more respectful of your real life time. It also makes getting through the game for a veteran player that much more fun. Like, I know when everything happens and at what times, so let me just get straight to the point. And now I can, and it's really freaking cool. Again, this is just an option, and you can very much play DR in whatever way you want. If you want to just ignore the new features, turn on classic controls and just wait out that timer, baby. No sweat. Speaking of getting calls, Otis has a voice now. He sounds great and isn't completely fucking annoying anymore. Can you believe it? So when our MVP, Odie here, gives us a call, we can now take it while freely doing whatever we want. Yeah, you can do anything now while a call is happening. It's so good. You can also mash R1 to skip each piece of dialogue in the call, and this also applies to survivor speech as well. So you can speedrun a bit better now. Speaking of them, the survivors you find all throughout the mall also got a similar quality of life upgrade. They're mostly like 95% smarter now. They follow closely behind Frank and fight for their lives. What's really cool is the all-new survivor affinity system. So each and every person you come across has their own taste in food and weaponry. Giving survivors their preferred items boosts their trust in you. High affinity survivors will more likely fight better, help each other out more, and get this, attempt to save Frank if he's surrounded by zombies. It's a really, really cool system that heightens the immersion of escorting these desperate people. Survivors with high affinity will also point out items, PP stickers, and talk to you about the interesting happenings they've seen during gameplay. The only real downside to the affinity system is that you don't really need to engage with it. The default survivor AI that I experienced in this early build is good enough that they value their own self-preservation to not need any special items to get by. In the playable section I got my hands on, the biggest group I was able to run with was about 5 survivors at once, and it was such a manageable experience. Nowhere near the hell it'd be escorting even like 2 survivors in the original game. You can even hold 2 female survivor hands now. That's how improved this system is. Speaking of that particularly, in the original Dead Rising, no matter how high Frank's movement speed stat was particularly, if you held a hand or carried any survivors, Frank would slow down back to level 1 speed. That is obviously no longer the case, which feels amazing. Of course, some survivors, like the famous crybaby, Aaron, still need extra babysitting, but is nowhere near as frustrating as any one survivor was in the original. Overall, this update is probably my favorite, and just wild to see great survivor AI in Dead Rising 1 of all games. Something else that got a buff was the experience point and photo taking systems. So in general, you get way more PP or prestige points from doing anything. Killing a certain amount of zombies, taking a cool pic, you're getting rewarded for your efforts now. I actually like how photos grant more XP, because in the original game, I'd barely take any pics, but now there's a reason to. Also, camera stores have upgrades for your picture-taking adventures. You can now manually focus, adjust brightness, and turn on the flash. What sucks about taking pictures is the erotica genre has been completely removed, which is weird because Jesse and Isabella are still incredibly caked up. Anyway, the overall issue with the experience point system is that before I ever reached the first area of the mall, Paradise Plaza, Frank was level 10. Yeah, I think the game might hand out a little too much XP. If you know the original game, that's literally impossible to achieve. But yeah, you're just soaring through the levels now, and I think it might break the game too early. One of the coolest feelings the original Dead Rising gave me was slowly seeing Frank become a badass superhero by the end of the game. Here, they give you that feeling so early that taking out hordes of zombies, trampling bosses, and saving survivors is like second nature. A big part of OG Dead Rising was its difficulty out of the box. It even had, and still has in this remaster, a feature where you can essentially new game plus your stats into a new playthrough if things got too difficult for you, meaning you could start back from the beginning with your current level. After playing Remaster for the time that I did, I don't think anyone will ever need that option ever again. The game has a healthy amount of save slots, checkpoints, and XP to keep you going and power you up. Obviously, I want people to enjoy my favorite games, and we're all getting older and have less time to struggle through our entertainment, but I feel like part of Dead Rising's challenge identity is kind of lost a bit. It might sound insane what I'm about to say since I even praised this just a few minutes ago, but I think rescuing people might be a little too easy. In no way am I saying the original game's bad survivor AI was like secret genius or something, but the raw thrills of desperately trying to save someone or even a group of people and having it backfire royally was so much more intense and created a perfect horror atmosphere. It was soul-crushing getting those cutscenes of survivors getting brutally massacred because you couldn't save them. You'd feel the losses, especially if you were a few yards away from the save room tunnel. Remember, Dead Rising was also a horror game back then. Now it's completely an action-packed joyride where I saved literally all survivors and defeated all available psycho battles in the time I got with the preview build. It's the year 2024. We need games to be as accessible as possible to sell, but maybe, Capcom, consider a harder difficulty for crazy people like me. Zombies will still stop you dead in your tracks if you're not paying attention, and bosses are still powerhouses, but the new movement tech really helps in countering anything the game throws at you. All that to say, yes, remastered right now, the build that I played feels overall easier than Dead Rising 2006. I really hope this current balance is just for the preview period, or if there's an optional difficulty select. The game isn't out for a little bit, so I guess we'll see. Something I was disappointed with, and I might be the only human on planet Earth who thought this was going to be a thing, is the lack of a truly interconnected Willamette Mall. I was hoping all zones would be one seamless map like the recent Resident Evils and Dead Space remake, but DR is in fact still zone-based. The load between each zone is like a millisecond, but I still would have loved to see this iconic location fully realized through a modern game design lens. It would have helped this version of the game stand apart even more from the original version of the game, but I guess that's why this is a deluxe remaster. God, I just hate the word deluxe. It's so stupid. Why not call it like Dead Rising Revived or something cool? I don't know. It just feels like a product that I'm purchasing. Oh, you're getting the deluxe remaster. Sorry, I'm just being a jerk. It's okay, seriously. On the subject of the mall, man, does it look great. I always thought the original Willamette Mall looked awesome, and I still love it to this day, but the devs on this remaster really did a great job at revitalizing every single zone's locations. The first big visual change is the first zone you visit, Paradise Plaza. It's now ocean-themed, with beach details all over the place. It actually lives up to its name, having a new paradise motif. It's pretty beautiful, and I love all the blue. Wonderland looks and feels even more like an amusement park with its new facades and signage, selling its particular vibe even harder. The food court, alfresca, and entrance plaza all look the same, but way more detailed. I really appreciate all of the small signs of chaos and pockets of wear and tear you'll see around the mall. It genuinely looks fantastic. So with that praise in mind, I have to rain on Remastered's parade again. This might be something only I care about, but man, the game's overall color palette is so unnecessarily washed out. The original Dead Rising had a vibrant color scheme, and not only does it help make the game look as visually appealing as it does, but it also helps from a gameplay perspective. Items are much more readable at a distance in OGDR than DRDR. This is something that can change with more development time, and I hope it does because the mall looks amazing now from an overall visual fidelity standpoint. This washed out nature also makes the title's nighttime scenarios way too dark. I could barely see anything at first. I was kind of forced to holster a toy glow-in-the-dark sword to get its extra light bonus. Something you could do in the original game, but wasn't completely necessary. It feels necessary now. And yes, I did mess with the game's brightness settings and couldn't really get any great results out of it. Right now, this is just an issue with the game itself. That brings us to the characters. We gotta talk about Frank. I'll start off by saying I think Capcom is trying to make him look a little closer to his off-the-record model, which I don't know why you'd do that. The extreme Widow's Peak ages him quite significantly. He looks so much older than he's supposed to, and I kinda hate it. Frank West was never meant to be a beautiful, conventionally attractive protagonist. He was always meant to be an everyman, an unlikely hero whose journey starts off a self-centered one, but then turns into him making a real change. Original Frank looks like a pretty well-traveled guy, a meathead that lucked into this situation. New Frank looks like he's running for office, but his entire advisory board hates him.
There's a helicopter coming. 3 days from now. At noon, it's my ride.
Is your ride reliable?
Absolutely.
Frank's new voice also irks me, if I'm honest. Terrence Rotolo was fantastic as Frank, so hearing him not come back is genuinely disappointing. Frank feels more like a generic everyman, trying to be heroic, where in the original, he's in it for himself. He's douchey to almost everyone he meets.
Yo, Frank! Give me a hand here.
Hey. What gives?
Considering the helicopter and all, we have to work together.
then has a change of heart. And that's interesting. Bland, normal dad running for office is not interesting. Well, what's really sad is no original actors are back. It's all new cast, but I'll keep it a stack with you guys. Some of these new performances weren't directed too well.
What in the hell are you people doing? Run! Quick, move! Get over here! What in the hell are you people doing? Run! Quick, move! Get over here!
You guys are looking for someone here, aren't you?
Who is that? Where did you take
You help me, I help you.
Damn. You're one hell of a journalist, aren't you, Frank? A hot-headed, underhanded, hotshot paparazzi with nothing better to do than to invade people's privacy.
I try. You got a point?
You guys are looking for someone here, aren't you?
Who is that? Where did you
You
take it?
help me, I help you.
Damn. You're one hell of a journalist, aren't you, Frank? A hot-headed, underhanded, hotshot paparazzi with nothing better to do than to invade people's privacy.
I try. You got a point?
This is my store!
This is my store!
Listen to me. And listen good, partner.
I don't allow vandalism in my store!
I get that the entire game is voiced now, even in gameplay, but I know for a fact a lot of the original actors are still working. I'm sure they could have come back to voice these previously silent in-game dialogues. I'll be fair and say there are a few great performances here. Otis sounds great, Dr. Barnaby's actor is definitely channeling his original counterpart, and Adam the Clown is still perfect. Adam not only sounds accurate, but looks insane now. That's something I can't complain about at all. Aside from Frank, I think every other character looks phenomenal. By the way, I'm making a point of this because I love Dead Rising's story and characters. I loved how they all felt not good, if you know what I mean. It kept me guessing at every turn who was actually trustworthy and who was gonna become zombie food. Understand, I've only played a bit of Remastered, but something tells me I'm not gonna vibe with the rest of these new performances. Look at the upcoming Metal Gear Solid 3 remake. That game is supposedly doing more with its remake treatment, but also keeping the original Snake Eater voice track intact. Why couldn't we get that here? It's only baffling because there is a direct comparison that, in my opinion, is much, much better. And that sucks. Before I move on from this, I wanted to say that another wonderfully performed character that I've experienced so far is Jessie. And no, I'm not just saying that because I had a mad crush on her back in 2006 and still do. Oh my god, she's so beautiful now. But also sounds perfect as well. I mean, just look at her. Good god, Capcom. You did a great job with my girl. I'm gonna need the playable Jessie mod as soon as this game drops, modders. I hope you're listening. From the limited main story I got to play, everything was the same, script and structure-wise, making me question why the actors had to change even more. I imagine there won't be any real story changes in terms of new scenarios later on in the game. There was one small thing I noticed that had changed that might be a sign of things to come with the rest of the game, however. When fighting Cliff in the hardware store, his PTSD-fueled dialogue about Frank being a communist Viet Cong has been changed. So he used to say this:
You can't tell me, can you, fella? Oh yeah, I know why. It's because you're Viet Cong. I'm right, aren't I? You are nothing but a filthy communist!
Now he says this.
Tell me, can you, fella? Oh yeah, I know why. It's because you're a mole. I'm right. Aren't I? You are nothing but a filthy animal!
I probably don't have to elaborate too hard on this point, but this is completely lame. Cliff is supposed to be a Vietnam vet, traumatized by that particular conflict. He's clearly lost it in this modern day war zone, and that pressure is rising to the surface. It's sad, it's interesting, it's real. All flavor and spice from this character is lessened now. This feels like an unnecessary overcorrection. I get that the US government back in the day would call the Vietnamese soldiers Viet Cong through the context of terrorism, but it wasn't racist. An American war vet in 2006 would say this if he served in that war. It's strange to cut out that original context. Dead Rising was published in 2006. It's a product of its time. I highly, highly doubt anyone nowadays would find those original lines offensive. If Capcom's writing staff were scared off by these lines personally, well, I've got news for you. Writing an interesting, traumatized character isn't a reflection of your personally held beliefs. Creating drama based on a real-world connection is compelling. Vietnamese soldiers were calling themselves Viet Minh historically. Viet Cong is inherently political, and maybe Capcom just wanted to avoid all politics with this re-release? Then what's going to happen to the game's main plot then? Dead Rising is very political and very interesting in its main quest. Don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting its message to be axed. I just think if you're willing to have the message it declares by the end of the game, why change something like this? I know I'm going on and on about something that really doesn't need this much attention, but it's got me worried about some of the other side stories potentially changing as well. Like, is Joe's cutscene gonna get changed? I hope not. I really do appreciate the efforts in attempting to modernize Dead Rising 1 from a gameplay perspective, and it is really fun to play, but things like changing the entire voice cast, making Frank look like this, and hearing these line edits makes me not want new players to experience the game in this way. From the short amount of this remaster I've played, I think the original game's story content is much, much better. Why not try preserving that in all of its glory? I guess it's good that we have a readily available version of original Dead Rising, but I want to play that game with this game's mechanical updates. Cliff is now a generic army man traumatized by a war. It could be any conflict now. He's a flavorless army dude that is as generic as all of the other new takes on the characters. It's really unfortunate. Wow, I really didn't expect to talk about that as much as I did. It may not seem like it based on this video, but I did enjoy the core gameplay experience of DR Remastered in this preview build. Again, I wish this was more of a remake with significant changes, like an open-ended mall that was interconnected. But the quality of life that is here is greatly appreciated. I do vastly dislike almost every voice change, but it was fun seeing these personally iconic characters remade in the RE engine interacting with each other. I can't stress enough how good this game looks, especially the mall itself, but also wish the color grading was a bit clearer and colorful like the original Dead Rising. I'm going to reserve full judgment until I've finished the game when it actually comes out, but I'm a little mixed on it right now. With all of my negativity and concern, I am interested in seeing what the final game has to offer. I hope there are some actual real additions to the story, like a new ending perhaps, or maybe a new boss fight or weapons to use. Costumes? There are a ton of Capcom character DLC costumes, and they all look really cool, especially the RPD uniform and the Rikuo costume. Frank is double caked up with that Rikuo costume. I wasn't looking, I promise. But the possibilities are endless. But I've ranted enough. Those are my impressions and detailed thoughts on Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. I guess we'll see how it pans out.